In this interview, we return to V8 Ranch with Luke and Catherine Neumayr, who discuss what sets their business apart from the version of ranching most people know from television, including Yellowstone. They also talk about raising their son Knox to be an 8th-generation rancher and why patience matters more than boldness in a business where a single decision takes years to prove itself right or wrong. And since I've been teasing this question a bunch now, we might as well jump right into it because, a lot of people watch Yellowstone or whatever else, and they have this misconception of what ranching is, that it's all cattle branding and, herding cattle and whatever else. It's a sophisticated global agricultural business. And so I would love to know, what does it actually take to run an operation of this scale? And maybe what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you all see about what modern ranch life is?
Well, we loved the show Yellowstone too, because when it came out, all of the livestock world was so excited that there was going to be a show that kind of represented our world. And
Yeah.
and we do love Yellowstone, but I will say, you know, the world that is portrayed on Yellowstone is exciting drama and land disputes and politics, and the cattle on that ranch are more of a commodity product, which cattle in general is a commodity, and I get that. But at our ranch, it's a completely different experience. First off, we don't utilize horses. So that's something very simple, is we don't ride horses to work our cattle. But more than that, there's not nearly as much drama, and we have a train station we're taking people to or anything like that.
Right.
Days I wish we did.
But so
Yeah.
on Yellowstone, they're taking those cattle when they're loading up the cattle to move them to the market to, provide their product to someone and then get a check back. Our business is completely different because we are seed stock producers, which are people who raise cattle, sell them to other cattlemen. So breeding stock is what we have. And I think that the cattle that we sell, they're certainly not, a commodity. It's more of a branded product, a V8 Human or V8 Shorthorn. And more than it is people aren't buying from us based on a pound rate or anything like that. They're buying an experience and a service and a branded product. So people might say, well, I want to wear a Ralph Lauren shirt. There's people who believe they want to own a V8 Brahmin. And so that's because of that, compared to Yellowstone, our life is a lot more about our customers, about building relationships with people. We have a product that we have to market. We have to actually build the brand and talk to our customer base. And it's not as simple as what they do, which is loading cattle up and taking them to an auction barn. So it's completely different in that regard of just the way that we market our product. I think that the management of the cattle, certainly similar. Some of the problems that we run into, predators that could hurt our cattle, problems with the weather, all of those things we deal with. But the main difference is our product is more of a breeding product, a boutique product even, marketed to a specific client. And that's a big part of what we do, is the marketing and the customer experience.
I think.
Luke was talking about getting the social media presence, focusing more on that. They don't spend a lot of time on that on Yellowstone, from what I know. So, yeah.
And that's something that, not only do we raise breeding stock, but the cattle breed that we have the most of are Brahmin cattle. And they're somewhat geographically limited here in the United States because they thrive in tropical and subtropical climates, where there's heat and humidity. Where this Yankee does not do well, these cattle do great. So while we are more of a southern breed here in the U.S., if you look at the globe, the world, anywhere along the equator, and a little bit north and a little bit south, you'll find Brahmin or Brahmin-influenced cattle. We've sold cattle to 6 of the 7 continents. There's no cattle on Antarctica, so I think we could probably say we would never sell cattle there. But something, referencing it back to Yellowstone, we have to deal with global issues a whole lot more than what, even normal, I don't want to say normal, but domestic cattle producers have to do. So if there's some sort of political uprising in Venezuela, that their markets. If there's something that's happening in Asia or India or Australia, those are things that we really have to pay attention to because those are big markets for us. We export a lot of cattle and semen to those areas. So we have to just kind of remain mindful of things that are going on all over the place. For example, Australia is on a very big push for polled cattle. Polled cattle are naturally hornless. So if we're talking about utilizing things like Facebook ads, we don't want to push a bull that we're trying to sell semen on in Australia that has horns because it's going to deaf ears over there. And that's, it's really, really fun. And that's something back to this whole generational thing is there's a big chunk of the day when we are sitting in a computer on a phone, typing, texting, doing things like that. And Catherine's dad still to this day doesn't quite understand what we're doing. He thinks that we're like boomers playing, balloons on the computer and doesn't understand like everything that goes into it because that is something that is new, I guess, for our generation compared to his. Another really, really great thing about Yellowstone, and like Kat said, we love it. And aside from like the nuanced differences, the same way like if a doctor watches Grey's Anatomy and notices things that are different like that, we don't have to talk about those things. But for us here at V8 Ranch, it has created an entirely new customer group for us. All of these people that love this Western lifestyle it's on TV. And we noticed Catherine and I both have V8 shirts on. We wear these all the time. These are like our work uniforms. We have a completely separate merchandise line of clothing and candles and stuff like that. And we've noticed that with the popularity of Yellowstone, that side of the business has completely taken off.
I wanted to ask about this. You mentioned your little guy, your son, and Catherine, I'll start with you because I wanted to ask you about balancing motherhood and leadership. How do you balance these roles, the leadership role with the motherhood role, and then how do they kind of influence each other?
Well, just this past year, last school year, we switched and started homeschooling our son. So that's changed it again. So that's been different because now it's my ranch roles and my role as a mother and a wife, but now I'm also the teacher. But it works really well for us because at the core of everything as far as raising Knox, I'm trying. When he was little, I used to post pictures on Instagram. I'd always use the hashtag raising a rancher. And that is what we're trying to do is raise a rancher because, not only are we trying to prepare him for the future that will exist for him as he would be the 5th generation of our family to have this ranch. He'd be an 8th generation rancher. We have to also make the adjustments to the ranch so that it will exist for him. And, I think I'm always aware of the fact that people always mention small businesses, that people start a business and then within 5 years, there's a high likelihood that business fails. I'm very aware, though, that there's plenty of businesses that have existed for a very long time that still you'll see like they're closing their doors. I have to be very aware of the fact that you have to keep improving and adjusting. And so even though V8 has been going since 1944, I never feel like we are a safe business. I feel like we constantly have to make adjustments so that business will exist and serve the next generations of our family. As far as balancing it all, I think if you were to ask me what's my number one is raising a rancher and trying to raise him to be the next generation. And the way that looks is very similar to the way my parents raised me, which is a lot of on the job training. We're constantly adding more education into his life in the ranching aspect. And so, we never miss an opportunity to point out something that we think he needs to know, whether it is the udder on that cow could be better, or this cow doesn't have a lot of doability, which is the ability to stay fat on not a lot of forage. the ability to basically be what's called an easy keeper.
Okay.
But all of these things we're trying to teach him.
Yeah.
Because I want him to be able to feel empowered to step in that role far before the world says he's ready. I think my dad was the son in a family business. He was poised to do what he's doing today, which is, run the family ranching business. I think he was maybe 15 or 16 years old when he started having really real responsibilities within that ranch.
Yeah.
So my son is 8, and I think to myself, like, at what point can we start handing actual responsibilities to him where he starts to feel ownership and feel like a valued part of the family business? And that's really important to me.
Yeah.
And, I think, like Catherine just said, we take him everywhere with us. There isn't a conversation that happens about the ranch that he's not a part of, if he wants to be. It's not like we have board meetings and he has to sit at a conference table and take notes.
Right.
Every evening we'll go take our trash across the ranch to the dumpster, and there's just conversations that happen. And I think what we're really hoping for him is that he's able to kind of slide into these roles a little easier than, my branding experience was when
Yeah.
I just say, "Hey, Knox, you're doing this now." And he's like, "Whoa, WTF, dude. Like, I've never done we haven't talked about it." Like,
Yeah.
we want to make sure that he is still able to enjoy his childhood and be a kid. Like, that is something that we don't want to not necessarily take away from him, but not, make sure that that's still a priority for him because he still is 8. He loves playing games on an Xbox and goofing off.
Yeah.
I can look over in the living room across the computer from me, and there's a huge pile of Legos that is,
Yep.
we want to make sure that we're balancing that, but still just gradually introducing him to new things around the ranch, new people. It's never going to be like a shock for him to step up to whatever his future role will be here.
Yeah.
He will be well aware of everything that's going on, and if he wants to hire somebody to brand the cattle, then that's his right, but he'll know how to brand them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that, balancing a business and parenthood and still keeping everything kind of in check, that we just kind of have, our goals for what we hope when he's 65, what his life's going to look like. And we always try to move towards that.
Yeah. And it's a great attitude to have that, like, as you both know, in 20 years or whatever, the business is going to be much different than it is today. Every generation steps into a business that's way different than the previous generation, right? And so it just keeps evolving. 8 generations of cattle ranching. How does that long-term perspective influence the way that you approach growth, risk, and stewardship in the business?
Well, I think in the cattle business particularly, I don't think that we're as fearless in making changes because changes take a long time in the cattle world. So the gestation length of a cow is 9 months, and then that calf would be probably 2 to 3 years from going into production themselves. So you're really looking at from deciding to try something new with your genetics. You won't know if it was a success or a failure until probably 4 years have gone by. And so because of that, it's very scary to stick your neck out and make a significant change, especially in our world of cattle breeding. That being said, it's easy to make some changes within the family business, the way things are ran, that can improve things drastically. The bottom line is that we have to make those changes that are necessary, no matter how painful they are, because that's the way we keep the business going for future generations. And so, having the difficult conversations are so important, and they're scary, especially when family is involved because there's feelings involved. But I think for the longevity of a business, for our business, taking us, getting us to year 100, which would be 2044, and beyond, we've got to have those conversations. We've got to make those changes, both in terms of improving the cattle, continuing to push ourselves to create better cattle, having the honest conversations we need to have about our product, which are the cattle, but also having those difficult family conversations about what changes do we need to make, so that this family business can continue to serve members of our family for generations. And I think that at its core is what's the most difficult for me, is to have those conversations with the people that you love, or to push other people to have those conversations in your family. It's difficult. But I think when I think about being the 7th generation, my son being the 8th generation, I feel confident those conversations have been had for generations in our family, that someone at some point had the gumption to have the difficult conversations. And I'm so thankful for that. And so that's why I feel like Luke and I will push ourselves to do that, because that's how we preserve this business, so that years from now, it'll still be here serving generations of our family.
This quote that Catherine's dad says all the time, and it's dance with the one that brought you.
Yeah.
Not, I guess, in marketing terminology or whatever, he would be a late adopter. He is not an early. So as we are going through, and I don't want to say taking risks, but just trying something different, trying to change. And like Catherine said, we're 4 years out from knowing if that's going to work or not. Can't, overnight just say, hey, we're going to change everything. Because years from now, we might be saying, hey, guess what? We're going to have a dispersal, because what we did, we went all in on that and it did not work. So more about taking, an educated or a calculated approach to things like that. And I think that's something that, we're able to share with Knox, with our son, and say like, hey, you know what? Change isn't scary, but just make sure you have your bases covered first. All right. Don't stick your neck out just to get it chopped off. Like, make sure you've got everything, and you can try something here or try something there and see what works. And that's the other great thing about being in the family business. Most of the time, no one's ever going to say like, hey, you idiot, like that was a terrible decision. They're going to say like, hey, you tried it. It didn't work. Let's try something else. And that's really what kind of makes it fun, is as we're out here. So we have about 20 other people, non-family members, on payroll here to help run the ranch. And there's so many decisions that we have to make sure are, I don't want to say are right, but hopefully they're right. Not only is our livelihood determined by those decisions, that there's 20 other families that those decisions affect as well. And if, we might say, oh, well, this week we might need to make sandwiches and stay home for lunch instead of going to Houston and eating at Papados because we didn't have a great, sales season like we thought we would. We don't want those other people that come here and show up every single day to have those conversations. So that's something that always, yes, it's a family business, but it's, not only our family that I guess you say owns the ranch, but so many other families have something to do with this ranch, and this ranch supports them. We always have to think about when we're doing things, because it's not just us or the core family members that, have to sign the checks on Friday when it's payroll day.
When my dad says dance with the one who brought you, what that refers to is the way that our cattle look. There's a specific kind of blueprint for how V8 cattle should look. And that has been honed generation after generation. And so it would be based on what originally the founder of the ranch, Howard Parker, who lost his eyesight, and then my grandfather and my father, and now us. I think I love it. Sometimes within our own home, we'll be talking about things we want to do in the business and things that we think should be done. And then I will share those ideas with my parents, and my dad will push back a little. And I'm thankful for that pushback. And I'm grateful for the wisdom that the older generation allows for us, not at the time, but sometimes. And Luke will attest to this. Sometimes I'll say, that balance that exists of, let's say I want to put my foot on the gas and push it. And my dad saying like, let's tap the brakes, or my mom saying, let's tap the brakes. even if it's a little unwelcomed at that moment,
Yeah.
a little time to sit with it, I think that balance right now is going to keep us both moving forward and innovating and improving, but also staying true to what generations have built here. And so
Yeah.
when it's my turn to be the one tapping the brakes with my son, with our son, I hope that we have a similar relationship where he shares his one of the people that we've always followed says big, hairy, audacious goals. He shares his big, hairy, audacious goals with us.
Yeah.
And I hope that we say, like, we're going to help you chase your dreams for this business. But I hope we're also brave enough to share maybe some of the wisdom that could help it as well. And I hope he's receptive to that. And I know that I can continue to try to work on being a little more receptive. But
First, folks.
I just think that if I step back from it a little bit, we're very lucky to work alongside people who are willing to share the wisdom that they have.